Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning, Al.
We were last here in August for your conceptual review of the Alexandria Center and Campus Master Plan. On behalf of EDC, I would like to thank the Commission as well as staff, Kerry and Rebecca in particular, and City Planning for the working sessions that have gotten us to this preliminary level. Your presenters today from OMA are Sho Shigematsu and Scott Abrahams, and then from West State, Danielle Cassini.
Good morning. My name is Sho Shigematsu. I'm Director of OMA New York, and I'm very excited to be able to present to you the progress of this project since, as it was introduced, since August we had a productive workshop with you and DCP, and this is the result. This is the building, how it stands. We will explain to you the facade in greater detail later, and also the lower part of the facade that Scott will present, and of course Daniel will present the public space. I will flip through quickly these parts because you probably know, but if I'm going too fast, please let me know. This is a campus, it's very close to the water. Of course, we have to address the resiliency plan, which also will be presented later. This is a campus in a slightly zoomed in plan, how the walking distance is created through these circles from the station and the pedestrian circulation around. This is the site which is here for the North Tower and existing condition for the other buildings. These are the series of views that are noting existing conditions. It's a view from the entry looking east, which I know you have some concerns, and this is also a view when you arrive to the roundabout, looking south and east. Again, this is a view back on the right side, view back to the west side, and this is a view to the north with a great view to the water edge. This is a view to the existing site, to the North Tower. And this is a site plan. The colors represents different program. This is a zoom in. This is the 30th Street stair that was addressed last time. They're coming out to a public space. And then the lobby is in yellow, and the food and beverage is basically sticking out to create this kind of glass transparent box that creates a level of transparency from the plaza to the north. But also providing this circulation through it, a shortcut through from north to south. This location was also created in consultants with the wind consultant, so that this location makes sense also for the wind issue that has been addressed here. This is a tower massing. We really wanted to emphasize the purity of the massing, so we didn't want to do too many designs that really convolutes this purity. The only difference is that there is, of course, a plinth. There is a deck. So below the deck and up above the deck has a slightly different, or very different design approach to it, which Scott will present the base later. As you might know, this is how the building was stacked in the kind of typical lab buildings to create a mechanical layer in the center, and then stacking again a building to create efficiency of the vertical mechanical distribution, and also that caters their tenants. So it's a very unique building. Out of that ideal building massing, we actually reacted to the site by shifting the 3 bars with a core and ideal lab to prevent the wind and create a much credible arrival in the central plaza in the center. This is not a new color scheme. This is showing how diagrammatically how our new design facade is actually responding to the existing facade by having a slightly more dense side, which is in red, which is on north and south side, and east and west side, and the green, which is on the north and south side, that promotes a transparency. So it has a synergy, but it's not exactly the same. This is in detail how this facade actually reacts to different program from the lobby to the mechanical to the lab and the kind of upper penthouse screen wall. Of course, the program is radically different, but we wanted to make sure that the purity of the massing is expressed by creating a seamless facade. And of course, the bottom is again slightly different. So in short, the east and west side has slightly denser grid, and the north-south side has a regular grid. So it really creates a sense of massing in a different angle by having a denser side. It clarifies the massing of the volume. It's hard to see, I'm sorry here, but this is basically the regular grid, and this is the half grid that is on the east and west side. By having this, the reflection of each bars don't really occur in a kind of in this facade. By having a denser side, so when you see an oblique angle, you actually read the massing more clearly. This is the detail of the mullion that we are thinking of, which you see here in front of you. We didn't want to make the mullions and louvers that look like an afterthought or added element to again emphasize the purity of the massing. So we have two details. One is in the north and south side, which we call it a crease. Basically almost like the glass turning into the mullion, so it looks highly integrated. And also this is basically the reverse on the east and west side, a pinched mullion that also looks like a peeled edge of the glass. So we want to finish the mullions in a highly reflective finish so that it looks seamless from the glass. So both looks kind of part of the glazing. So this is a view, as I was saying here, this is the east and west side. In oblique angle, it creates this sense of solidity and the transparency on the north and south side, which caters both ambition of the client. And also, want to mention the south bar actually has the mullions are angled, going along with the angle of the massing, which derives from the zoning angle. So one bar is angled and the rest is straight. This is a view from south, which you see the entrance and the canopy. This is a view from the north, which Scott will explain to you later. Section and the view at the plaza, looking at the existing side and the new side, which Daniel will explain, and the transparency that is created at the lobby, which you see through in the diagonal view, always the east side and across the river. And these are the materiality. Of course, the glazing is highly performative, so it's with low coating and with reflective finish, and as I said, mullion too. And the corners are also expressed as revealed to really express the massing, to clarify this the joint between the south side and the west side. So you read the edge of each bar clearly by having this corner detail. This is a view from the west. And some views from FDR. So you can see it's a fairly intention quite generic. But the massing as a whole looks quite unique. Now I pass it on to West End.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you all. My name is Danny, creative director of the City Work. I'm happy to continue to present what we already introduced a few months ago. So here we can see the master plan. I think it's important to reiterate that when we collaborated in the conception of the design, it was for us was very important to deliver comfort. So also the positioning of how the tower meets the ground is actually a byproduct which delivers intimacy and comfort, which is one of the lessons learned that we had. And here you can see the full resolution on the north tower and how the integration is achieved. It's also very critical that we understand circulation and flow. Just as a reminder, we have 29th Street, and for us it's also very important that we allow that the circulation is on both sides, and generate something that today, we don't have, which is a welcoming experience. That precedent image, that rendering image that showed just illustrate to you all how you feel welcome when you arrive to a campus and a site which belongs to the city, which is really critical. If we zoom in, it's very important to understand the flow and the mass of people that we go through this welcoming space that they can just meet before they come in, but at the same time the permeability right at the tip and that transparency to have the food and beverage as a heart, and then also the 30th Street access, or even coming to a tenant space at the back. So all the spaces are actually, synced. It's really critical that we follow and honor our concept, which is based on the pocket parks, which is part of the legacy of New York, was actually what inspired us to deliver 6 different spaces, in which here you can see all of them. It's very critical that we understand the role of each one of them as the knoll, as the welcome arrival, a series of rooms which are self-activating, more intimacy where people can see across and watch their faces, or on the other side where we have actually medicinal gardens display, a patio where you can have furnishing display, where you can move around, and a little bit of a piece of lawn for people to touch in the summer, and an outlook balcony where you can see actually the skyline of the waterfront Manhattan. Here is how it all comes together in this resolution. It is really critical that we also understand that we had a series of back and forth where we're complying with the minimum distances, but also the spatial configuration to be able to understand the compression expansion that we are doing. In this drawing, you can really understand the quality of the space, where actually we're playing with extrusion and some planters to achieve those bouquets, and actually have the canopy that we deserve to actually mitigation of wind, but also deliver that comfort, almost like a green fur that you put on the surroundings, so you really feel pleasant in that environment. So this image is quite critical to deliver that quality that we're looking for, and how it's in dialogue with actually the placement of the building and the ground. We also revised with you and planning the interface of the building with existing space. We have minimized the shape, we have increased the setback to allow that buffer zone that you asked, so it's here achieved in this resolution. And this is just an inspiration of the character and atmosphere that we would like to differentiate in the 2 sides. So one side actually is the West Grove Gardens, and the other side the East Waterfront Patio, which we really want to create a destination. Today we see that people come to the end, turn around and go, but we really want to invite the people to come to the Waterfront Patio and experience. So if you allow me to walk you through, on the West Garden, it's about the expansion and the welcome arrival, the compression, and then you have the self-activating room where people can have an outdoor living room, go down to 30th Street, or actually come into the tenant space and have almost, we put as a placeholder name, the science halls, where people can actually collaborate and use those spaces accordingly. Here are a series of images that illustrate that sense of arrival, where you can actually sit and wait for somebody while you're in a comfort outside zone. Here is actually a road room, which is self-activating. You can clearly see that you come down, or actually you're sitting out, and you see how the people actually come to the structure, and the permeability with the building, or also look at the back, and you can have that face-to-face moment, as I expressed before. And even some glass to actually see the transparency to the 30th Street, which was actually requested, and we achieved it here. In the other side, we have what we call specifically the West Waterfront Patio, which we feel is very important because we deliver now comfort where you really want to be here in this display. And it's very important for us that we deliver comfort as part of the lessons learned that we have experienced. And the quality of the space is actually very unique, and responding to the same principles of the facades, where you have translucent and you have view corridors which actually allow views to the skyline. For example, here the human building, right there on the outlook balcony. You don't need yourself when you feel invited to make the turn and coming into the space. Curiosity. And that is what we're achieving with the sequence of spaces that right now is just naked. And we're trying to create this by the expansion and compression of the space. This piece of lawn is very important because with this amount of green, in terms of metrics, we're performing plus 40% of softscape. So it's not everything harsh, which is really critical. And at the end, we have a table display for medicinal plants that we're working with the team of the owner to try to make that actually as a celebration of medicinal part of the mission statement. And actually from the tenant space, you almost have a contemplative space, still see the waterfront, and very important, the shelterness that the pines are providing. Today, we wanted to bring a little bit on the first initiation about textures. We really want to work with resilient materials. Granite is timeless. Granite is the rock where Manhattan sits, and we think granite is the material. And this is just an impression here. The white crisp can be in contrast with actually the existing gray materiality that we have today on the pavement, which is this one. So we try to pair, but now shift into granite, so it's the same color, but improving the quality for a more timeless and durable material, also due to winterization. So here's two samples in terms of what goes on the pavement, and this is for the seating edge, which we have actually studied in detail, which I'm about to walk you through. So we're not detailing one fits all, but we are in the new generation where we try to create different modules, where you can see these are all compliant with the New York City standards for ergonomics. And we're also proposing a series of screens which are actually to do with wind and noise mitigation, including even water fountain at the edge. But very important, we also have conveyance view corridors, and this is actually responding to the same principle of the facades and the transparency. So we allow views to the waterfront, but at the same time we create comfort and intimacy. The planting scheme is fairly simple. I remind you all, we're sitting on a structure, so we need extrusion of planters. Here we have what we call celebration of bouquets, which is a riparian corridor inspired, and in winter time the trunk will celebrate the texture. While here, trees are so much under stress, you really have to put the right species that tolerate wind, that tolerate harsh environment, and that's why we have shelter the pine as actually part where we can only stand that. Very similar to what you see in the Hudson River Valley, so we're trying to adopt that and increase it. Here you can see the different
My
depth.
pine trees die. They do. I'm just after.
No, but that's not appropriate to the Hudson River Valley, but never mind.
Happy to discuss and receive your comments. And here, I think it's really critical to acknowledge we have working with the team to provide 4 feet actually of soil, which is really critical for the existing of the plants. And to conclude, furnishings, we have very little customs and we have more off-the-shelf furnishings. And this is just a table of metrics for all of you to remind. I finish here and give back to Scott.
I'm Scott Abrams from OMA, and I'm going to take us through these last few slides about the facade down on 30th Street. This is an axon looking at 30th Street here in the Bellevue access road here. Along here on 30th Street, there are much different requirements for the facade than, say, the tower above. Mainly 2 things. One, this 30th Street facade is part of a 4-sided continuous flood wall system because we're in a floodplain here. So, it's resisting hydrostatic pressures and dealing with the construction needs of the flood walls. And the second thing is that every space below the plaza here is predominantly used for service and or mechanical space. So, two here is the conduit vaults, 4 is the loading dock, 6 is the connection to the existing service level, to the east and west towers, and then 3 is an egress stair and a front of house entrance, and number 5 is the 30th Street stair that gets us up to the plaza level. On the top here is a drawing of the 30th Street facade in a little bit greater detail, and below it is the correlating plan that fronts 30th Street here. A couple things to note, again, and see it in plan, you can kind of appreciate the space requirements and the tight space down here on the 30th Street frontage. This is the 5-vault conduit transformer sequence and the 4-berth loading dock, and the service ramp goes into the existing service level, and then between that are the flood-compliant egress stairs, front of house entrance, and the 30th Street stair that gets us up to the plaza. A couple things to note here. The first flight is quite wide right off the street, and then because there's a connection to an egress stair in the lower part of the service level, this stair gets a bit narrower to allow for that connection. And then again, just to sort of orient, this is the entrance for the 30th Street stair, and this takes us up from plus 8.15, nav 88, up to the plaza deck, which is 29.65. This is a rendered elevation along 30th Street, give a little bit better sense of the materiality and the design here. Of course, this is the tower, this is the plaza edge, this is the part that is the North Tower, and our intention is for that to connect seamlessly to the existing plate, so it sort of, unifies and completes the campus. The facade down here was partly inspired by sheet piles that are often used to resist water and sort of an honest understanding what this concrete wall is going to be. We've integrated sort of a corrugation that creates a verticality, that creates what we think a nice separation between the slab and the tower above. At areas where there's openings, we're introducing a stainless steel that has the same profile and perforation. And the perforation does two things. It addresses ventilation requirements at the Con Ed vault, and also provides visibility to the 30th Street stair, which we'll show you another image in a second, and also provides some visibility into some front of house areas here. This to the left here is a diagram, and what we did just for clarity is just to sort of color the stair. And you can see that it is a continuous, uninterrupted passage up from 30th Street up to the plaza. The yellow here is the footprint of the building. Over here is a section through the stair, just to demonstrate that immediately upon entering, you have a sense of where you're going and what you're meant to end up. And again, it's uninterrupted. And that egress stair that I mentioned earlier, that kind of reduces the width of the stair, is making its connection right here in the drawing. And lastly, these are two views zoomed in of the 30th Street stair. This is the entry right in front, where you can kind of see the first flight, the second flight, and then the sky up onto the plaza. And here you have a better sense of how our design intent is to arrive at in the end, as we develop this stainless steel that's perforated. Again, creates some visibility, gives a sense of where you're going and what's going on in there. And we find that this angle that sort of mirrors the pitch of the stair also is sort of a nice sort of intuitive suggestion of where this goes, which is up to the plaza. So at that, I think we're going to stop and open this up for questions and discussion.
Just a really quick question. If I'm standing outside this large passageway, I can see from the side of the stairs? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like from outside,
Yeah.
when you're coming down 30th Street eastward, the intention is that you will see through this, and at night it would be lit, and during the day we would try to use color
So is
inside
that
or
glass
something.
or is there glass?
No, it's open air. It's just perforated open. Yeah.
Okay.
So it'll ventilate, and it's open to the elements.
Will the design elements that you just described denote this is public?
Yes,
Or
I mean,
not? Or what else might do that? Because as wonderful as the materials may be, and it does, in the renderings at least, it's not clear that this would be a public.
one thing that's missing is the signage component of this. I
Yes,
think
signage
what
and-
we'd like to talk to the commissioners about is how we can bring that back at a later date to, help clarify that.
If I may then, just one follow-up, just because you mentioned the signage. Are you intending, and is it required for you to be providing signage at various access points from the public, for the public to understand that these various spaces are accessible to the public, and specifically, part of that is to those who do not work
Yes.
within the facility. So is that something that you intend to do systematically and are required to do?
We're going to work on the signage down here on 30th Street, as well as identify that on the plaza level. So at both ends, I think there's an intention of making that clear.
Well, also as you described it from the avenue and so on, that you will be doing that.
Yes.
So just lastly, these spaces, these are not, do they not come under the, or they, sorry, I don't mean to do something wrong with my phrasing. Does the signage and so on and the publicness, does that fall under, for example, regulations on privately owned public spaces, or does it not? Can you perhaps enlighten on that?
Ross, do you want to?
Yeah, Ross Wilson, Council.
Hi, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Hi there, hello, okay, good.
It's a hybrid because it wasn't built as a public plaza,
Yes.
but under the new legislation that came in the last couple of years, it is subject to some of the requirements of the plaza, and we're under the jurisdiction of city planning, so we're working not only with, obviously, the commission, but also with city planning on signage and plazas, and so I would call it a hybrid. It doesn't fall under the plaza, wasn't built as a public plaza.
It's not a POPs.
It's not a
So
POPs.
it's not a box,
But
but it's a
under
hybrid.
the legislation that came in 2017,
Right,
it's subject to certain requirements of plaza in terms of signage, in terms of reporting and compliance. So that's why it's considered a hybrid, not a
so
POPs.
then certainly that PDC at least will be able to have that as a reference.
Yeah, and your
Points.
colleagues.
Yeah, we've been, and your colleague
Colleagues.
mentioned in the beginning, we've done sort of joint sessions and meetings. with
Yes,
city.
I'm asking and reiterating.
Yes. So, and your colleagues at city planning are sitting at the table with your
Yes.
staff, so, yeah.
Thank you.
I think I really appreciate the care and detail that the building design is presented here. And, from the mullion design, I think it's very successful in the way that you shift the mullions from east, west, to north is very interesting, which I didn't understand in the earlier presentation, maybe I didn't develop or whatever, but it's a great development. And also the way that you're thinking of the plinth and the materiality of the plinth, which I guess is precast, is that
It'll be cast in place.
these
Yes.
cast in place, and then you have the perforated, I mean, I think the perforated is great.
That's perforated.
It's hard to
Perforated on the side, right? And then for where the window piece is, or the
Yeah,
grills,
so like
I
this
guess
would
it's
be
not.
the cast in place concrete, and then this would be the stainless steel.
Right.
Be here, 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 and here.
And on that side piece.
Yes.
Because I think as most people are accessing it probably coming down 30th Street, right? And so knowing that, once you know it's there, you know it's there, then it's kind of an insider situation. But I think that's a great way to identify it beyond signage, that you have an architectural response to how to get up, right? So I think it's very successful myself, and I think, how dense the perforation is of course another thing you're going to be looking at, I'm sure. So, I'll leave it. I had a question about the handrails. So, what is the handrail at this up there? Because people can walk up. Is it just glass? It's just
On the
glass.
plaza level or the stairs?
Well, up at the plaza level.
It is a glass screen. It was actually in a series of workshops that there was transparency, because we also want the canopy and the foliage of the
So it's
screen.
just glass.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. That's perfect. Okay. And so I don't know. Then probably the plaza designers.
Yes,
You want to
go
talk
to
about
the
that?
site plan if you don't mind. So I guess while you're, the overall,
It's good.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Just, I guess, a question on the, obviously I'm not an architect, but what is what's the study been on this type of glazing and bird safe issues?
So we're aware of the, upcoming policy for the building itself, and we're tracking that. We're developing the facades here and the glazing specs, so that's something that, we're going to be working on moving forward. As far as how it relates to the screens out in the landscape, again, we're
Oh,
aware.
I'm not worried,
Oh.
I'm sorry about that. I just meant for the facade.
Yeah.
So if you could
Well, I
get
think
that.
that the model is misleading because it's highly reflective, but I think the low-E coating actually creates a level of transparency in the depth to the glazing that is not too reflective for the birds to fly. And also east-west side, which is exposed to the water, which is east side is slightly more dense, so hopefully it's less glassy. But of course, it's something that we have to.
It's fine.
Right, if we could move beyond hopeful to.
Right,
Yeah, yeah.
to actually meet the requirements.
Yeah.
So I definitely appreciate the spatial concept and the idea of the moving from these different rooms, and materiality and form that exists there today. It's very unfortunate that this is not being done holistically, but it isn't, so we just move forward. And I think the upgrade to granite for the paving, I mean, all those stupid horseshoes.
Yeah. So it's not integrated with the
Right.
existing.
But you've tried to give your design and building some breathing room, which is good. But, you're doing, it's a little misleading to show us those two colors of gray, because there's 4 colors of awful concrete out there. So, you're actually going to be putting this up against that yellow and brown, which is not these two. So
Correct.
just
Correct.
to be clear of this.
So to respond to you, we're fully aware that's part of the pilot, yes, you're accurate. But we thought that in the gray predominance and majority of the color, gray was kind of the baseline. So we took that as our background to be able to array that color palette in.
No, I'm completely for it. I would not want a proliferation of
Yeah.
those.
And I have to say that we even had more petals that were always coming in here, and we actually...
No, I'm aware of that.
Yes.
I just want to say, having just planted those pines at Rockefeller University in a similar proximity and elevation above the river, we are not projecting them getting that high. So this happens to be the best selection of pine that you could use for this condition. It's a beachfront wind, but they will get sheared by the wind. So if that height is something that you're counting on for windbreak, I don't think it's going to do the job. But it's the right tree, and I can't suggest anything that would get any taller. The last thing I wanted to say, and it's purely my opinion, and you can take it or leave it. That panel of grass, which while it's getting you the 40% on the east side, having it directly under a bench and being of a dimension that it is, I find it to be gratuitous, is the kindest thing I can say about it. And I know you have to hit a certain percentage. Maybe you want to reconsider. I just do not believe it will survive. All the other turf that's on this site today is elevated. People don't walk across it. And I am concerned that people are sitting on the bench, So if there's another way to get your 40% that might last, just a suggestion. But otherwise, I think, conceptually, spatially, the response to circulation, all of that is good.
Thank you.
Just one question about the walls. What material? Are they're stone, the 3 walls?
And it's still determined. We're right now working and designed, what is that, cladding. We are considering different materials. We're working with the client team. But, architecture is always first. Architecture just finished developing the whole concept for the facade. So for us, it was very important that relationship, but we have not yet determined, it's work in progress, what is that material. But it's really critical for us, based on the principle of the tower and how that comes to the ground, that there are some that are 100% translucent, and then these are the ones that we're questioning about that materiality.
You mean it might be glass?
We don't know yet.
Well, but we are thinking,
It'd be interesting.
I think we know that it's a great opportunity. It's not a kind of utilitarian element. So we are thinking to enhance the experience here by creating some kind of response to the wind, as in like kinetic or sound making, or some kind of element that really actually does the job, but also enhances the senses that people can get in this project.
So they're obviously placed where they need to be placed for the winds first, and then
Yes.
you're going to see what.
So if the pines don't get as tall as you're hoping, having it glass could be really great, at least in the early years, that you can see it.
That's
It'd be good.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just interested in how
not developed. So.
Yes,
Yes, we were still in
No, but
progress.
we are aware that it's a great, it's need to be designed.
Great.
Can
Thank
you have a
you.
permit place for the signage and wayfinding? Do you have a permit place for the signage and wayfinding?
We're working with 2x4.
Any other comments? Thank you very much. Wonderful. Begin.
Hi, I'm David Lewis, I'm one of the principals of LPL Architects. Very pleased to be able to present a proposal for the Brownsville Library renovation and expansion. The project is in Brownsville. It is in the, essentially the heart of Brownsville, particularly right in the heart of the Howard houses. It is a project that's very central to the community, particularly a community that is essentially defined by having this library and then there's another one pretty far away. So it's really a center for service. Right now the library needs fundamentally more space. Its existing conditions, the 1908 Carnegie Library has gone through a number of renovations surrounded by the Parks Department and the Howard houses. So just to walk through or walk around the project, there's a fairly extensive 8-foot high and then a 12-foot high fence. The 12-foot high fence is Parks Department, and that's on two sides of the, on the east side and the west side. The library has essentially has an ADA ramp in the front, otherwise a security fence extending all the way across. This is part of the Howard houses, the fence on the side, and then running around the other side is the continuation of the Parks Department fence. There is the Howard Houses Community Farm, which this view is taken from, looking to the west side. And here you can see that the lower windows that face into the main reading room have been blocked out, in the 1960s. On the opposite side, on the east side, is the playground viewing again to the building, and then on this end, Glenmore Avenue has been terminated as part of the transformations in the 1950s. So the building is really at the end of kind of termination below this becomes pedestrian, because partly pedestrian. On the north side is a fairly extensive ball and handball court, and that's actually the view to the back side of the building. It's fairly extensive, heavily occluded by existing trees. Just to give a quick history of the building, in 1908 it was built. Fire happened in 1922. There were substantial renovations in 1960 and in 1980s. In the 1980s, they rebuilt the entire parapet and put on the additional metalwork to be able to make it meet code, and they've replaced the roof more recently. From a program standpoint, we're meeting extensively with the community and with the librarians. They desperately need more community space. And they also need more media or interactive space for teens. And so roughly the existing program is about 10,000 square feet. They need to add about 4,500 square feet to make the library as robust and as functional as possible and for this community. And the big changes are increasing some of the children's area, but really it's increasing the public community spaces and trying to find a collective area where they can meet. The current site conditions of the project, it's a 100 by 100 foot plot and bounded substantially by parks in green, NYCHA in blue, and then this is the PS 298. So even though it looks like it's an object in the field, it's really bounded by properties. So those property divisions limit to some extent what you can do. From a zoning standpoint, one of the key driving issues for the site is there is a 30-foot setback. And that 30-foot setback today goes right through the back of what was originally the stacks. So you're substantially limited in where you can build toward the back. There is ability to build up and to build to the sides. And so what we've been looking at doing is trying to respect the symmetry of the front, keep the building in the area where you can build, namely here, and to build up. Look at adding the community room where it can have view out to the community, but also in a really good, flexible, functional space to meet their multi-valent needs. The other is that this building is viewed from the towers. Most of them are 6 to 13 stories in the perimeter and look down on this building. So we're very cognizant of what this rooftop will look like. The basic strategy is that currently the stairs connecting between the cellar, first floor, and the mezzanine are not to go 39 inches wide. And we're looking at making the building much more accessible, reinforcing movement through new staircases to decide to activate the design and put the addition on the roof, but also pull it back so it respects and is distinguished from the existing walls. And it's right sized to the community. So it's not a full build out of the roof, but it's set back. We've also looked at it from its solar shading, because this is going to get a fair bit of sun. So we want to be able to make sure if we have glass up there, we're solar shading it so that in the winter, you actually allow sun in, but in the summer, that canopy extends out, protects that glass. It's 12 degrees off, so we also have to look at the east and west elevations from their solar gain. So the proposal we're looking at takes all these cues into place, and viewed from above has two green roofs, one across the new addition and one on the existing project. All the mechanical we're locating behind the screen towards the north side, where it's less visible to some of the area. We are anticipating transforming the ground, because right now the ground is underutilized as an air conditioning unit. This is really a pinch point. This is parking, and opening it up and making it a series of essentially public spaces. A public space for sitting in the front, a small gate here, public sitting space, a plaza, and then elevating the terrace, because the piano noble at the main floor is about 30 inches up, and we can raise that up so that in the main reading room here, you can get access to that space without, then using the ramp off the backside. The go between existing conditions and new, the existing condition has currently in the lower level the community room. And what we're really doing is pushing the community room to the roof, making that part of the public space for this library. The transformation makes the media in the lower area where light is less critical, and the office is to the north. The main reading space is one we want to preserve as a space. In its existing conditions here, we're anticipating keeping all of this space equal, opening this where the stacks used to be as quiet reading. The elevator is existing, keeping it in the same location, and otherwise adding services back there, as well as view towards the north. The mezzanine space is more or less kept as is, but we're pulling the staircases to the side. Again, the only addition that's really being done on the side is that staircase and that staircase, which allows that mezzanine to be larger and to be a teen area. Up on the rooftop, current condition and the proposed condition, and again, this is the 30-foot setback. So you can't build past here, and we're setting it back here so that you essentially have a foyer, a very large community room that can be divided into two separate rooms and then have means of egress off of both of those. And this is a fairly generous room, but it's one we're seeing is the real desire for the library to meet their multifunctional needs. And then the top of this would be a green roof as well. So the mechanical space is all located back here, so that the view of this is primarily a green roof. Looking at the sections, current condition, what we're fundamentally doing is simply adding this piece here, not changing the parapet height at all, keeping the parapet height as is, rebuilding this roof so all the mechanical can go through here, and we can mechanically, through an accessible floor, mean that we can keep this as low as possible. So we're trying to keep that as low, so the mechanical isn't up above. The east-west section, similar kind of view. You'll see that again, this is mostly where the structure is being done. We're adding this piece up on top, and then you can see the two stair towers in elevation beyond. The front elevation, the first things we're doing is trying to reduce the sense that this is a kind of secure perimeter and open that up to the public, and then make the addition on top of this, keeping that parapet exactly as it is, so we're not changing the existing building. Keeping the accessible ramp, and then looking at a public seating area to the left that would be open, and then a gate to the side. The north elevation has a light well, which allows lights for the offices, and here, where the stair towers are coming inside, both of the sides, so they're not protruding beyond the east and west walls, and up above this mechanical area protected, and then the facade of the addition from the back. The side addition shows then the similar condition where we're bringing up the side stair tower, goes all the way up here, and then this is the public addition. what we're doing in the development and articulation of this is complementing these and referencing without imitating. So we're trying to do a thing where this is solid and punch. We're wanting to treat the facade as a screen. So it deals with a kind of screening, solar shading to deal with energy, but materials that reflect the building without just imitating it. And then the other side is symmetrical. In terms of the visuals, this is what the current condition is, and we're looking at addressing this, really opening up that front, opening up these windows so that this is all part of the main reading room, resymmetricizing the entrance, rebuilding the front steps, adding essentially garden to the side, and then adding the addition here that is seen as secondary, very much secondary to the existing building. We always want to respect the primary building and its historical importance. From the side, similar kind of representation in the kind of before and after, and then showing it from the oblique. And here you can see this is the NYCHA fence, and we're anticipating continuing that as a kind of low security so that it welcomes the community, and the Howard Gardens just to the left of the shot. On the rooftop, if this is the existing condition, this is the proposal to be able to do a glass enclosed with solar overhangs, and then treat this as a green roof, and make a connection between the stair tower to this piece so it's seen as one volume, but at the same time acknowledging that in this room you want to have views out. This is one of the things we heard from the communities. They want to be able to have the idea of being on the rooftop and viewing out to their community as part of the community space, and that visual relationship, not only from being in it, but also from being able to be down and seeing that there's this new community space is critically important.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're not changing the interior. I'm a little...
Oh, yeah.
In other words, you're doing the community space and the
Yes.
outdoor space, that I got.
Yeah.
But the interior, you're not doing anything to expand the program.
We are in the main reading room. We are keeping the main reading room and restoring it to a more historically appropriate. Right now, it's vinyl floors and metal shelves. It was burned in the 20s and it was repaired in the 60s and 80s with ventilation ducts in the corner. We're going to restore
I got it.
Yeah.
You make a beautiful reading.
reading room
I'm talking about programmatic.
programmatically.
Where community members come in, have access to technology,
Right.
which we understand people use as their primary source of tech. I'm just curious, they're going through all of this to get a pretty reading room
Yeah.
and an outdoor space.
And a completely reconstructed lower floor. So the lower.
I don't understand what they're doing on the lower floor.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just,
Yeah. No,
so tell me what you're doing. You're reconstructing the lower floor, but you're not adding capacity.
right now, the lower floor is legally inaccessible. So you,
Got that?
yeah. So let me go back to the plan of the lower floor, if that might help.
First, let me preface by saying I think you're doing a beautiful job. I'm
Yeah.
just curious why they would go through all of this and not try to enhance accessibility, capacity,
Right.
programmatic, when we know that libraries are such an important part of communities. I'm
Yeah,
just curious.
Yeah, and I think, so, this has been a key issue, which is how do we make this as multifunctional as possible and provide the spaces that are best fitted for the main reading room, which is adult reading and children's and teens. So all of the primary spaces are in that. We're opening up the stack area behind, which currently is underutilized. And in the lower floor, this entire space from here down is not used. So the only space that's used is really that community room and the break room, so that this whole area is essentially leftover in storage. So in addition to moving this community room up to the roof, removing all the offices that take the roof, these areas on the side, this is the main floor, that area, relocating those in the lower floor so that becomes public space,
Let me get
building
this.
the media space.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Okay.
I have a difference of vision, but I certainly can't
problem with what you've designed, because I think it's wonderful. It's lovely.
So, I mean, the answer is that we're trying to make everything we add and everything that's there as robust as possible. So then the rooftop really is very much about viewing. The green space is there to view out. It's also a space to be truly multifunctional. This is the view from the kind of northwest corner and showing the kind of interplay between the existing, the open windows, and the new stair towers to be able to make access to that new addition. We're looking at this as being a terracotta series of baguettes as well as vertical fins so that you get transparency to glass as well as shading. More open up here, and this is again all stair tower up to here, and then continue all the way across to here where you have shading for or protection for the mechanical. So we're really trying to tie the mechanical system, stair tower, light, entrance into the same language. Picking up on some of the terracotta details in the building, but now building it out of the material.
Anyone here from the Brooklyn Public Library books?
This is the view from the other corner, which looks at the raised terrace. Again, the material, the new entrances, and this is again opening up some of these windows, allowing the light bulb to be here, and making this public. Right now, this is really an inaccessible public space, and making that part of a public space for the community. The view from the north is really symptomatic of trying to distinguish it, but acknowledge. So you have the existing building here and the new addition. And then the raised elevated terrace at this point so that you actually can make this usable in relationship to the other space. This is work that we're really happy about the community has expressed real interest in having a rooftop space. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
The material that we're looking at.
Yes.
You said that's a terracotta?
Yeah, we're looking at that being a terracotta. We have been going back and forth over a number of different materials, and more recently we've honed in on using a terracotta that's either in a vertically scored or baguette form, which is basically can be a long, thin 2 inches by 2 inches at length, which allows this then to be screened and still make it connect, still allow light.
So, I think this is great. I think the development projects are going to be great. And I have some questions. I mean, I really appreciate when you were speaking to kind of relating to kind of finding a synergy between the existing building, but also making it different, right? Not just copying it. So but when you have the side elevation, I was curious, there's one that's, maybe it was a drawing, because it looks like you're going from a more dense to a more transparent, because when you start to read the transparency of the mullions on the upper level,
Yeah,
right, there's some elevation.
Yeah.
Are you varying the
spacing
of these terracotta pieces? And I assume that we're going to see that next time, because I'm very interested in what, obviously I'm sure you are too, how they relate to the existing stone, and if you have a piece of stone and all that. So I was curious about the intention of that. I don't know, what elevation is that?
This is the west elevation.
West, okay.
So this is the west elevation.
It's the same on the east.
Same on the east,
Right.
more or less. And so what you're talking about is we are indeed varying the spacing here.
Right.
So we want the sense of not a kind of either or, but a gradient that occurs. So that if this facade is really brick or opening, we want to reflect that kind of sense of scale, but acknowledge this as something that goes from more solid to a little bit transparent to one that goes really transparent without abrupt breaks.
And then the screening on the mechanical is
Yeah.
also
It's also terracotta.
Okay, so other questions. So the green, you have the green roofs because people are looking down on it,
Yeah.
but I assume people aren't going to walk out
No.
on this surface. So,
Yeah.
but you've raised, to put the green roof, you have to raise, it has a thickness, right?
It does.
So
Yeah.
you still can use the same railing height?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And the roof on the top, 2 questions. I'm interested in the profile, like the section of it, how you can get it to be very thin, because I think that's the beauty of what you're doing, is making the thinness of it, but also screening the light
Right.
in the summer, the warmer months. But you aren't required to have a railing up there, not to.
I don't think so, and this is something that we're still digging into. Do we have to have essentially a tie-off to be able to get access? What are the code
Right,
requirements?
because if somebody has to go up and.
Maintain, yeah, we'll probably end up having a tie-off. We're going to try not to use a railing, obviously. Unfortunately, that clicker seems to be no longer advanced. We'll just have to look at this image for the rest.
So,
We can go.
okay, so, because that would be kind of a drag here, obviously.
Yeah.
But
So-
we'll
so
have to look at that.
The profile, and this is what for us is key, is that we're trying to make that as thin as possible. We're trying to make that really, really it's delicate, anticipating that underneath here is solar shading, right? Not so that if you look up, you'll see it as a kind of solar shading as opposed to being a solid. So it has a bit of detail that's picked up to some extent in what the dentals there.
Right.
Yeah. In terms of the section profile, I think that's the best image to be able to show what it is.
There.
So what we have here, and we'll get to the section. Here we go. This is ideal, it's probably going to come thicker than this when we start looking at the structural conditions. But to answer two of your questions, one of the things we're doing here is we're keeping the historic room height, and that's here. And we're keeping the deck height here and reworking this entirely. This is being entirely rebuilt. So because currently what you have is a light gauge, this is a light gauge joist in here that won't take any of the loading. So we have to rebuild and pin through the walls so that all that structure is hidden, so it's not going through the main room. We then allow this to be the insulation, raised pedestal, and the 5.5, 6-inch sedums at this point. Up here, we're doing a similar thing, so that all the mechanical is coming through here. This can be just structure, insulation, and then the sedums. And that will drop down here so that we make that glass as clean so we don't have a heavy fascia. And that this is literally an extension, a light extension. The green roof stops here. This is just solar.
Great. And then one other area which is, okay, so people will come in, Scrippy, at night through the stair towers? No.
No,
They come in the front.
They come in the front.
Okay, so that area on the side where the tables were sitting
Mhm.
there, what's going on there?
Let me get to the complete view.
Do you have that
Yeah,
rendering?
yes. So the
No, not
idea,
here, but the back,
the
around-
back view.
around the corner.
I can go
by
to
the
right.
towers.
Yeah, by the
table,
towers.
The white tables.
Yeah.
There.
This is, the tables and furniture in development, but the idea is that this area is outside of the library. It is an outdoor space for reading, anticipating that the librarians talked about using this in spring and fall and the summer as a place to bring kids out for reading so that they can be a little bit more out here. This is why this gate is here.
So
They
there's
want
a
to
table.
provide a gate here for local control, but in general, these two doors will be controlled at a
So
library.
you just come out.
You come
The
out,
librarian would go in.
and the librarians
Okay.
could come past it. We're still in the detail of working through the kind of operational issues of these issues, but the premise is that really want to treat this as public space and usable space for the library. This is immediately adjacent to the kids area there, and that, particularly after school, gets very crowded, and there are times in which this could be a really nice protected space for kids.
So, can we go maybe to the elevation, or the front?
The furniture. Yep.
Oh, that's good, that's good.
Yep.
That's good. Well, first of all, to say, I think it's wonderful how you're taking advantage of whatever open space you have. And you've got a hell of a context around you. And, trying to restore this to the kind of jewel that it is and not have it just completely engulfed by fencing, even though it is, very close by, engulfed by fencing. So you said at the beginning something that I feel myself, which is the respect for the symmetry of the facade. I mean, those Carnegie Libraries are nothing if not completely symmetrical. So I'm looking at this, and I understand you've got to get ADA access one way. I'm feeling as if the sitting area, which I think is a good program, is maybe a little bit too busy. Maybe there are too many different steppy conditions. So I would just look at that again. And then I'm a little confused if it went to the true elevation. There are two trees that are clearly in raised planters
Right.
on the left side. And then there are two trees shown on the right side, but what are they growing out of?
Yeah, the ramp comes up here. This is actually proud.
I see.
The entire portico presses in front, so that there is a current planter on the back side
I see.
of the ADA accessible ramp, which serves as a retaining wall for a planter bed. So we're looking at trees here and symmetrical set of trees here, so that the trees are coming up from the same location on both sides.
I see. But not necessarily the same elevation.
That's part of the challenge of, right now, that's the
That we
level
know well.
of back here.
Right.
So that's the question of, do we raise up? The library has asked for a space for kids to gather so that they can use that space. So this
No,
is something that we're still
I-
looking at.
Yeah.
It's absolutely.
Oh, I see. So I guess you're
So
gonna
you
need,
had an AXO view, you had an AXO where you were above, you saw that a little better.
I got it. So I guess, you're gonna have to pick some pretty skinny trees. So that it doesn't,
There.
there we go.
So there's a green space here,
Right.
and they're trying to replicate that.
Got it, got it. So, yeah, that's my only real comment. Otherwise, I think all of the attempts to activate the space that you have is wonderful.
In the back, can they people get there are the two outdoor terraces, they're connected? I can't,
They're connected by ramp.
they are connected.
Yeah, that's how we're dealing
Behind
with
it.
elevation
Okay.
change. Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty narrow
I
because
don't
you have
see
a,
a plan.
yeah, let me get through the plan view. So this,
Oh, yes.
this is terraced, and then that, going from here, more or less to here, and that's in an area that's about 14 feet wide. So you basically have a sitting area here, one in the corner here, because it's so narrow, it's very hard to do much in there. So,
Great,
Can you go back to that elevation we were looking at, any of the front elevations? Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
So there's a large upper window. It
Mhm.
was originally a smaller,
Yes,
lower window. That was never a full-size
Yeah.
window.
that's existing. And what those were basically where the radiators were on the inside. So we had the radiators, and then they have these windows. But because we don't need as large a radiator to change the heating system, we're going to turn those into window seats. So particularly for the children's area. So it's part of a built-in, reconstitution of the millwork of the library. And open them up so when you're inside, you can see to the outside. Right now, you can't do that. You can't be in the main reading room and see to the outside except for it's only the high window.
I don't think that-
great, great.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry, we're going to take a little moment to conduct our public meeting business. So the public meeting is now commencing with the consent agenda. Today we have items 27323 to 27362. Please note the conditions of approval as recommended by the various committees and the associated recusals. Staff has noted Commissioner Sheffer's recusal from item 27333, my recusal from 27325 and 27333 as well. Are there any other recusals not noted? No, for the record, there are no further recusals, abstentions, or no votes. Would someone like to make a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second? Thank you. All in favor, please raise your right hand. All right, we have unanimous approval of the consent agenda. So now let's move.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Christopher Nolan with Central Park Conservancy. I'm the Chief Landscape Architect, and I'm here to present our re-envisioning of the facility up in the north end of the park, just down from 110th Street, Glasgow Pool and Ring. Pool in summer months goes to a skating facility, and in winter months, I'm here with the rest of the design team, Lane Advisio, who's our principal planner with the Conservancy, Susie Rodriguez from Susan T. Rodriguez Architecture, and John Doherty from Mitchell Jurgala, a part of our architecture team working with us collaboratively. Our project actually really is the capstone project for the restoration of the north end of the park. Work we began in the late 1980s. It primarily focuses on providing the program that's in this massive facility today, re-envisioning it in the context of the landscape by maximizing the kind of recreational opportunities to it. It is a tremendously well-used facility. Our driver behind the goal, establishing the design goals for this, is really to have the facility be integrated into the very purpose of the park. And the idea that the park was built as a primary preservation effort on our part. Restore the park, provide public program in a manner which is what the park is about. It's about being actually this reprieve from the city, the recreational opportunities, both active recreations and other recreational opportunities are really essential to New York as a whole, but certainly to the North End community. It's been a driver for our work since the early 1990s, really the mid-1980s when the design work began at the Harlem Weir. And the idea is that the facility really stands as a blockage between active use in this area of the park and active use, and we'll get into some of that. The idea is to create a design that provides all the public amenity to the greatest extent possible if we can. In many respects, this area of the park, these facilities actually, these communities, adjacent communities, use the park in a way it's much like it was in the 19th century. They cannot escape the country in the same way. The facility, as I said, really acts as a barrier in connecting these landscape types. It is built in 1966. Site chosen in many ways because of its topography, which is a driver behind some of the problems. And it acts, coming up from the north end, this is Justin from 110th Street, literally as a wall. The incredible landscapes on the other side of the rink are unknown to many in the community itself. This is actually a rendering, fairly recently identified, of the construction of the park and the site where it is. And this dashed line, which was not added by us actually, was actually part of the drawing itself. That's Huddlestone Arch. It is a ravine, and it was meant to be kind of a focal point. Coming from the north, it would focus the view to bring people into the ravine and the lock, which is the water course which flows into the Weir. And this is the natural topography, rock outcrops that come down and wraps around, and this was kind of crossing over the ravine to have the carriage drive go in. And Lasker was literally built at that very point. This is a scaling of Lasker Pool in that 1877 plan. The drive and the topography of the drive really reflect the natural topography. This is a natural ridge line. There's a kind of pre-park history related to fortifications that were at a high point. The rock actually, there's a break in the rock through the ravine, and it picks up again on the other side and goes up the hill. And literally that facility was kind of slid, almost jammed into that. The geometry of the drive kind of reflects the geometry of the pool, interestingly enough, really separating this landscape here and fundamentally altering the hydraulic of the area and severing the landscape connections. Anyway, this is a model from 1963, the design, literally maximizing. We actually found in our historic research record saying this is an ideal location, so it'll minimize the need for excavation. Imagine what this was like at a time when the drive was open 7 days a week, all day long. Literally, the activity that would go on here has no physical connection at all. And as I mentioned, the hydrology. There is a constructed water course which flows from West 100th Street through the park. Eventually, was supposed at one time opened up into the Harlem Weir, into a marsh and a series of islands. It was put into a culvert, and that culvert is actually 40 inches in diameter and is almost under surge. It is under surge the whole time, so that there's a fundamental miscalculation in the engineering. This is actually a photograph. The facility actually is flooded before it was opened. Its original opening is delayed by 8 months, and that has happened several times since. The mechanical equipment has been destroyed. And the facility at this point is well past its useful life in terms of the mechanical equipment, and this hydrological problem actually remains. The existing condition, as I mentioned, it is kind of beyond its useful life. It is a monumentally scaled facility. The actual kind of public space related to the use of a pool is big. It's underscale from a building perspective. It's not physically, it's not accessible. There's inadequate restrooms and locker rooms for a scale facility to scale. And as it laid into the landscape, it literally did. It severed all the circulation connections. It severed the ecological connections between those. The culvert goes under here and created this kind of service court area behind. We kind of refer to it as the service landscape. I'll take you through that. And again, from the north side, this is the kind of restored Harlem Air project we worked on in the early 90s. You can see that little piece is a remnant piece of the wall that was once a concrete wall built in the 1940s all the way around. There was just not enough space to actually make any kind of corrective measure in that area. Try as we may, we try to get that paint dark, but the cool blue is what the color they had. And that's an 8-foot retaining wall. And you literally cannot get in and around that to other areas in the park without actually engaging the facility. And it is physically inaccessible in every way. It's uninviting. You literally, this is where it's jammed right up against the rock. And right into the drive. That's actually the point of entrance, not that anything about the design. The trash can is actually the main threshold into the facility itself. Coming from the south side, you're in the service court now. It literally is the back of the house in every way. All the mechanical equipment is back here. The chillers are outside. And these are kind of necessary facilities related to it because there's such inadequate space in the facility itself. Coming in from Huddlestone Arch, you can see where the stream course is culverted from kind of this point going to the south. We have restored the lock and the ravine. We'll get into that a little bit later. And you literally come through. Many people who have actually went on this adventure get there and say, where do we go? And they either walk up the service drive to the west drive,
Sorry.
or they go all the way around. Yep.
We get the message.
Yeah, we,
Sure.
Not good.
we can shoot.
So the existing conditions. This is a line. Notice that the pool is actually empty. This has to do with getting in and out of the facility. We've put a lot of effort into, and Susie will go into that, actually matching the program and making the facility work better. As a skating facility, it doesn't work. It is literally the bottom of the pool converts to a ramp.
So what are you going to
And
do?
it's accessible.
Get to what?
Objectives: replace the existing facility, repair the damaged landscape, and repair the hydrology. Provide the largest pool possible. This is a thing that we spent a lot of time on, making the pool as big as we possibly can. Remove the physical and visual barrier. Develop a design inspired by the scenic landmark. That's an essential element. And build a welcoming facility that serves many park areas. And the big thing is we want to make it year-round. It's closed for big chunks of the year. So a little context to that. I'm going to send it over to Lane to talk a little bit about history.
So Chris set up the problems and the objectives. As with all of our work in the park, the design solutions are informed by the essential design and purpose of the park, which really was to be a reprieve from the city for all the people of the city. And this quote just really describes it really well and informs kind of our design approach. Really that the park was about healthful recreation for all, that specifically meant...
Okay, I'm sorry,
we
but this commission knows Central Park, so can you...
So, sure, absolutely. So that it meant about being a reprieve from the city, and that to the extent that there was active recreation, which this is an active recreation facility, that it should, like in this picture, skating on the ponds and lakes of the park, was also about the experience of everybody around enjoying the park. This is skating on the Harlem Mere historically, and then the water bodies in the park were created for recreation, boating on the Mere, initially in a very naturalistic setting, which over time gets much more built up in response to the pressures of use. This is the first boathouse, an expanding boating operation. You see the hardening of the edge, which continues in the Moses era. So the Harlem Mere really was built up, larger facility, concrete edge all the way around, a fence that went about 2/3 of the way around, and this is serving recreation, but not connection with nature, not escape from the city. And then over time deteriorates and is kind of abandoned and unused. And this is what the Mere was before we did our work, the restoration of the Mere, which is kind of, this is a continuation of that, and it really kind of sets the approach.
So our design approach, this is the Dana Discovery Center, opened in 1993. It's a restored landscape. This was once a concrete wall. This really sets up the idea that we can have contemporary uses in the park in a way, culminating with our most recent playground up at 110th Street, that aligns contemporary program today in a landscape setting. Our most recent project, which really set this up as a capstone project, is the ravine, completely restoring the water course, setting up the Huddlestone Arch, that's a historic view, to the service court, which sets up, we have a significant architectural problem to set up an alternative purpose use. That's what.
I'm Susan Rodriguez, Susan, I'm the architect from Nashville. Any case, so as all this extensive research and analysis has been really important and fundamental to understanding what to do. And I think we look for inspiration from buildings that exist in the park. So integrating buildings into the landscape, in particular into the step topography, both seeing that at Bethesda Terrace, Woolman Rink, but then how to transform this site. This is always sort of a shocking photograph because it sort of looks like it's coming up the Hudson River or something. But in truth, what we sought to do was to look at that history. And this is Olmsted and Buck's original, 1966. And then in trying to find what the topography and this space offered, we slipped the building and proposed to slip it to the east. And then with that, framing that landscape, move the water course, extending that through to the mere to create an outdoor room that frames this public space of recreation. So this is where the original sort of topography, Krishna, that beautiful pencil drawing, and this is where it is today, really a major obstacle, and this is what we're proposing. So moving the building away from that center, pushing it to the side. You can see the water course, the outdoor room surrounded. I'll show you a bit in a minute about the berm, but pushing the building itself into the topography right up against the drive. So here again, today, and what we are proposing. And as you can see, again, it's curvilinear form of the drive. Kind of interesting because these are actually pure geometries, both of these, they're pure circles. So how to find, again, that space, the building sitting here. I guess there's probably a pointer, right? Yeah, that's better. The building sitting here, the outdoor room of the pool that becomes a rink in the wintertime, and then the water course that extends into the mere, a new boardwalk and pergola. Here, revised, updated flow of the drive that continues, the water course that will come through, being able to now circulate and move around the entire facility. And one thing we did also learn from is the project that Todd and Billy did at LaFrac, where that landscape is open all year round. And in this case, except for the 2 months of the year requiring enclosure for the pool by Parks and the Health Department, but otherwise you will be able to move in and through this facility, which is very different now. There's a door, there's steep stairs, and it's completely inaccessible all year. So in terms of the planning, this is sort of the rooftop plan, and I think what's very important is how this translates, and Chris will go into this more, but inverts the hardscape and the softscape of the site. So here, the building is completely consumed in a rooftop. This is all a green roof, but here this is, north is down. The main entrance to the facility will be here, and you come in when it's a pool in the summer for the 2 months as a public pool, and then here this is sort of helpful, where then you remove that and you can see that below that whole roof deck is the main entry to the pool, all the lockers and toilets and all the mechanical plant. So very different than what you see today where you come through Huddlestone Arch and there you got it, that mechanical plant. It will all be consumed and sort of under the blanket of landscape. And then in the wintertime, these are sort of the extremes, summer and winter, but the facility will be open throughout the year. So there's opportunities to use that pool for other kinds of recreation at other times. But here you can see what then, this is all open. So as you come through Huddlestone Arch, you can come in, grab a cup of coffee. There'll be modest concessions. This, what I think is failed to say was in the summer, this area becomes a porch. It opens up, there are 32 glass pivot doors. They're 14 feet tall by 5 feet wide. They open up and give a really great porch. In the winter, then it becomes really like a large warming deck. So here you see a section and in the winter time. And so you can see the rooftop, the walkway that extends the existing topography. So as the first time you come to this building, if you came from the east side, you probably wouldn't realize you were on top of a building. The warming hut, the rink that will be inserted into the bottom of the pool, and the stone wall that comes from outside to inside, that same view during the summer months when it's a pool. And here you can also see this berm enclosure. So there's a pathway along the water course, but then the berm enclosure that kind of creates that outdoor room. And again, the large pivot doors that open out onto the deck of the pool. I'll go into the materials in a little bit, but here you can see this is about a city block long. It's 200 feet. The overlook, the elevator that gives access to the rooftop for observation. And here you can see how we pushed the pool down by about probably 6 to 7 feet. So it really is set within the landscape in a much more complementary way. Here the view within, below that roof terrace, bringing a skylight along this back edge so it lights up the stone wall. So in the summer when it's a nice open space, it's daylit. And here the view from above, looking back toward 110th Street, the Dana Center and the Mere. This is the drive as you look through. And then seeing it nestled within sort of this incredible landscape of Central Park. Chris is now going to go into the development of the landscape.
So the primary objective was embedding the actual facility into the landscape, and then connecting and embedding the activities and linking them together, not having them be disconnected. A primary objective on that was to both kind of improve the environment for this more active recreation, make the facility open all year round to people, create the green roof on top, which allows the connection across. Most importantly, was to recreate that stream course. Corrects the hydrological problem, corrects the circulation problem, corrects an ecological problem, allowing ecological activity. That's as far over to the west as we possibly can, maximizing the scale of the pool. That requires a fairly engineered slope, which we're working on now, to allow the water to pass through. The idea that it would open up once again into a freshwater marsh, wetland areas. And the idea is with this activity, could we actually get people out onto the water to kind of move in and around that marshland to experience what that was? That will require us actually removing the island, which was built in the 1990s, to screen lasker, breaking it up into a number of smaller pieces, distributing it across this kind of lobe, and creating access down to the water. So what was once a view to the 110th Street, this is where the ravine, the lock actually emptied out into a series of small islands. The wood footbridge went across, the service court, much of the plant material, and I want to make sure I disclose it, this is a significant landscape intervention. We've done an analysis of all the trees in the landscape. Many of them actually been planted in the history of the Conservancy in the last 30-ish years. And all of them actually disturbed to actually build the view going forward. You can actually now go through Huddlestone Arch. To one side, you'll be able to walk through the actual facility itself, or make your way around and create this path in such a way that it's accessible. People actually will have an accessible route, likely from 110th Street all the way into the actual, through Huddlestone Arch to the first cascade. There'll be a small series of smaller cascades as the water makes its way down, the engineered slope up the side. What was once inaccessible to a series of steps around it, you knew that you were not going directly to the building, becomes this. And again, another drop in elevation as we make our way around. The berm, which actually frames the room on the inside. The idea is to use a fence similar to what we use in our playground. It needs to be 8 feet tall, somewhere towards the top of the slope, planted, scaled with the planting to have people move around the pool itself. Coming from the north, and again, this is literally at the location where the stream course used to be. Very steep grade, the culvert's right under here. It's an elliptical culvert, the water traces all the way back. It becomes this. There'll be a crossing across the stream course, islands out here, and our opportunity to get kind of out onto the water. When we had done our work in the 1990s, we had contemplated the idea that we would introduce boat into the harbor here. Very, very small water body. There's also concessions to do that in bigger and bigger facilities, and we began to think, how do you get people to actually get out onto the water to experience this very unique and landscape experience just in from 110th Street, and that's where we came up with the idea of actually self-directed people moving in and around this boardwalk. The idea that we actually are we're proposing the construction of a pergola, a light structure to allow light through it, but a gathering area to kind of allow us to align the program we do with the data center to this area here. Be self-directed most of the time, but we can make school groups, facilitate people moving in and around the island, and actually we believe we'll be able to cross one of the islands itself through this marshland. And some of the views, the idea is to have a very, very transparent rail, the wood board deck will just hover just above the water, working on those details. The pergola structure kind of anchoring it to the edge. All of this is kind of foreground, even middle ground to the pool as you move in from 110th Street. We have some precedents of getting people out onto the water. Turtle Pond, something we had done in the mid-1990s. Very modest scale thing we had done at the 100th Street pool. It used to be water, it had silted in, we kind of bring people out. And some of the things in our most recent project where we get people to the water's edge as opposed to people kind of beating their way there. People are almost hardwired to get down to the water. They'll actually follow their own way. We kind of direct it in this rustical way, and we use some of these images to kind of demonstrate as we've made our way through the community review what that experience could really be like. And some views. In the summer months, we're proposing that will be it'll be a walking path, it'll be wide enough for people to pull off on either side to bird watch and not have circulation problems. It'll be an active fishing pier. We have run a fishing program at 110th Street at the Dana Center. This will give us an opportunity to do that. Having that objective to have the facility open all year round, we can use it for programming and we can bring people on programming into the North Woods. And then the winter months, we had the idea that the boardwalk can actually be covered in synthetic ice, and it would be an experience that would be evocative of actually being pondscaping. This idea that historically, we kind of moved through it pretty quickly, but the most popular recreational facility in the park was to actually skate on the water bodies. And it was a designed experience. It wasn't just it got cold. They were actually designed to be lowered so that water would freeze faster. They built enormous seasonal facilities to facilitate the active recreation. And when we began to kind of conceptually think about the project, that's where I was like, could we facilitate skating on the water in some way? We actually align with this technology, this synthetic ice. It's a plastic material that lays right on top. It's akin to it's basically a furnishing over right on top and allow people to move in and around. And we envision that being basically a furnishing that's put out programmatically as a program of the Conservancy to allow it to be kind of less of a destination experience like a skating facility, but more of just a landscape experience as you move around. I'm going to hand it over to Susie to talk a little bit about the details in the architecture.
Just to finish our presentation, just to sum up the materials. So the pergola is made of steel structure with wood infill, pair of double columns. It's cantilevered so it's light on the land. And so you can see just in detail here the double columns, the cantilever structure, and really it's stone base. And then we're right now looking at both black locust and cedar, trying to find alternatives to hardwood, which you know is a very challenging proposition. And potentially even in some of the less touchable areas, some of the recycled woods. In terms of the materials for the main pavilion, we have the fieldstone. We're trying to make it very compatible in quality and color to Cobblestone Archway, but the scale is, they're a tremendous monumental scale. So we'll start to bring that down as it comes from outside to inside. We have stainless mesh, blackened though, which will be at the overlook. Very importantly, bird-safe glass for the entire expanse here, as well as in the elevator enclosure. We have some zinc edging, very minor. Again, the wood soffit that goes from outside to inside, and then some of these are materials that extend but are visible from the outside, where we have a beautiful curvilinear tile wall that leads you into all of the locker rooms and changing facilities. With your back to the pavilion, the enclosure required for the pool area, 8 feet above the fieldstone wall that defines that entire perimeter of the deck, and then a light infill, a very different enclosure, but that would allow for really containing passage of cell phones and all those sort of practical matters. And then here again, just a little more detail as you look in the bench above, the railing, etc. And this is the 14-foot expanse of those large pivot doors, and then the continuation of the walkway. The elevator itself with the beautiful tile within, and then curved glass with the wood stop that goes from outside to inside, sitting atop the stone base. And then just some details of those railings, both at the boardwalk as well as at the overlook. And then a detail of the primary structure of the enveloping fence, sort of a modified picket. It's something that we feel will integrate into the landscape, and as maturing landscape over time, we'll be able to kind of come through the fence. And then I'll let John just finish up on, I think, as you can probably tell implicit, but the sustainable strategy is really important to the whole overall.
Thank you. So as we're looking to make a beautiful and functional facility in the park, we're of course looking to do so in a sustainable and ecologically sensitive manner as possible. And you've seen the strategy of allowing the landscape to really surround the site, surround the building, thread through the site, come over the building, has not only the visual and experiential benefits that you've heard about from Chris and Susie, it also has very tangible environmental benefits, of course. We're returning the site from a site that's mostly impermeable to a highly permeable site, thereby reducing the load on the city's sewer system. That strategy of embedding the building in the landscape also has great insulating benefits, so it's a building that we're able to greatly reduce the heating and cooling loads on because it's very well insulated by the earth. We are therefore using almost no air conditioning. That big great room, that we're thinking of as a porch that Susie showed, that will be naturally ventilated, so no air conditioning will be used for that. So it's a very low energy building in the people spaces compared to a similar facility. On the potable water front, the current pool leaks quite a bit. We're going to be making a new pool that doesn't leak, so that's going to save tons of potable water. We're also using low flow fixtures within the building, so the water use within the building will be greatly reduced from what it is now. On the material front, we will be, it's a very simple material palette of glass, wood, and stone. We'll be locally sourcing all of that when we can, using materials very high in recycled content as well. And we're just going to close, the program part piece, isn't it? So that is the presentation, and we're very thrilled about it, and we'd love to hear your feedback.
Before we all enthusiastically speak, there are three members of the public who signed up. John Reddick?
Just stand up.
Whatever you prefer. But you have 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is John Reddick. I'll talk on the run. And I've been a resident of Harlem since the 1980s, and I've been very much involved as a professional in public art projects, public space enhancements, and public space improvements. And over that time period, I've been the liaison between community members and the design development. And in August of last year, the Conservancy engaged me to work and be involved with the outreach for this project. Because the Leicester Rink project is a culminating capital project in the northern end of the park, it represents the end of 30 years of public engagement around the enhancement and improvement of that park area. Since August, we've met with over 300 members of the community who participated in a series of informational events and community meetings, as well as site tours and park outreach to the various constituent groups. We have hosted several public meetings in partnership with the Harlem Children's Zone for audiences in Central Harlem and through the NYCHA developments that surround the area. For us, a consideration is the fact that a lot of people in the immediate neighborhood were involved in all these evolving projects over the last 30 years, and their voices were really heard in the design improvements. The neighborhood has changed over this period of time, but we really want to engage people who have been involved in the long-term use of the park, and speak not just singular as the constituent users like swimmers and skaters, but also people who use the park in a very natural and open way. consideration. And as we go forward in the next year, we will be working out the programming issues in terms of capacity and how we engage the public even more in the final facility when it opens.
Thank you, John. That's true. Next is Lara Section.
Hi, I'm Laura Sakini, representing Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Dear Commissioners, Friends Preservation Committee commends the Central Parks and Conservancy plans to restore the historic water course and landscape, reconnecting the Mere to the rest of Central Park, one of the most beloved landmarks in our city. We appreciate the Conservancy's thorough research and thoughtful approach to this project. The current aging facilities are incongruous with the Olmsted and Box design, and we believe that the proposed structures will result in an overall improvement to the area, creating a more pleasant experience for the community and one closer to the intention of the original plan. Friends is, however, concerned by the lack of details on such a complex project. We would like to have a better understanding of the materials specifications, and we are particularly curious about the visual impact of the mesh and fill to be used on the railings and fences. Finally, Friends appreciates the Conservancy's intent to shift the balance of the existing ice rink to emphasize recreational skating over hockey. However, we believe that the proposed solution of using cones to delineate the rink is misguided. The lack of a permanent barrier can create an unsafe environment for recreational skaters and potentially force the local community to use the typical artificial ice pathways proposed by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe there's one more speaker. Daniel
Ava.
Ava, thank you.
ATHA, thank you. Hi, my name is Daniel Ava, and I'm a botanist at the New York Botanical Garden with 25 years of experience conducting field work around the world and all 50 United States. Most recently, I completed a botanical inventory of the wild plants of Central Park to be published this year in a peer-reviewed journal. I currently manage the New York City Ecoflora Project, a community science project documenting the spontaneous flora of New York City. I thank the committee for the opportunity to express my support for the Conservancy's renovation of the Alaska Rink and Pool, and I am testifying today as a professional botanist and a resident of New York City. My testimony today is not on behalf of my employer. In 1966, the Alaska Rink and Pool was built over Montaigne's Rivulet, Manhattan's only remaining free-flowing freshwater stream. The Conservancy's recently renovated the lock through which the stream flows, restoring some of the original ecological features as well as the naturalistic enhancements designed by Box and Olmsted. The restoration was so successful that most visitors do not even know that it took place. Botanists, birders, and other naturalists are grateful the Conservancy used site-appropriate native plants and preserved much of their existing flora as possible. In 2018, a citizen scientist volunteering with the New York City Ecoflora Project discovered a small grove of the endangered pumpkin ash tree, previously covered up with non-native species and was unobserved prior. Today, the Conservancy proposes to daylight the remaining portion of the Montaigne's Rivulet, restoring the only functional freshwater marsh on the island of Manhattan. I have every confidence the Conservancy will use appropriate native species such as alder, bulrushes, cattail, water lilies, and more to create food, shelter, and habitat for red-winged blackbirds, marsh wrens, monarch butterflies, red-backed salamanders, bullfrogs, spring peepers, and many other creatures that depend on marshes for food, shelter, and mating sites. We face unprecedented environmental challenges that become more frightening every year. The United Nations has declared the 2020s the decade of ecosystem restoration. The Conservancy's plan for the Alaska Rink preserves opportunities for active recreation in a beautiful and environmentally sustainable structure. Most remarkably, it also creates a unique ecological habitat that will provide the surrounding community and all visitors with a high-quality nature experience where they can observe a rare, diverse, beautiful, and very importantly, a functional ecosystem in the middle of Manhattan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 1 second to spare, good job. So I have on my list that there are 3 other speakers, but I believe you're here for Brooklyn Children's Museum. Is that correct? So there's no further Lasker people. Is that correct? Okay. All right, so commissioners, please, your comments, questions.
I think it's very exciting. I think it's a great plan. I think that the strategy to obviously move it to the side and let the water come through is fantastic. And, you know, I really applaud the design and the sensitivity to the landscape. I think also the material palette, I'm really interested to see how it develops and how we'll need to see the actual selections, I guess, of the wood, whatever you're going to choose, with the stone that you selected. And I assume that's the same, the wood in the building and the wood in the pavilion is the same. I mean, so they're family together there. I guess the question about what came up about the mesh, I don't know what the question is about the mesh in the.
There was a part of the testimony.
Yes.
Yes.
So I don't know what the concern is.
What's the issue?
The rendering doesn't look like there's any mesh, so is that really going to be invisible?
Or not the renderings, it shows mesh.
Well,
It's very
It's
transparent.
very thin.
I use it a lot. It's about as transparent as you can get.
And I think the blackening of it is to make it less transparent.
Like less shiny.
Less shiny. So I mean, I think it's a great solution because it's probably the most transparent thing you can do except glass, and you don't really want to put glass up there.
And glass would then present the problem of birds, and also you have to clean it, and then it becomes incredibly opaque.
Right.
So you don't reflect
So
it.
I have no concern with it, but
I don't either.
yeah.
Any other comments?
Looks great.
I just want to say I think this is one of the greatest projects I've ever seen. And I've been on the commission a long time. It is a spectacular integration of architecture and landscape. You all deserve to be richly rewarded for this extraordinary effort. It's beautiful. So,
Sorry, one more comment. So when we saw this earlier, we had raised some concerns about the overlook area and companion seating and accessibility, and just wanted to make sure that
We're
would be
working
progressed.
will someone make a motion, I believe, based on what I just heard, to approve this project?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your right hand. So the good news is it's unanimous. The bad news is we don't have a quorum. So we will provide our recommendation to the full commission so that this project can be included on the February 18th consent agenda. Thank you very much.